Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something I think is incredibly useful. We're aiming for a really concise, systematic breakdown of, of one of the world's most profound philosophies.
That's right.
So if you've ever wanted to get right to the core of it, you are in the right place. We're going deep into a collection of ancient sources, and the goal isn't just to learn about a path, it's to understand its ultimate mission.
Exactly. The texts you sent over, they're all laser focused on one massive question. What is the goal of this whole practice? What's the core teaching? And what is the exact path to realizing Nibbāna?
Extinguishment.
Extinguishment. So our mission here is to distill that essential blueprint. We want to give you the practical structural roadmap for ultimate freedom and kind of cut through all the later historical noise.
And what we found in these foundational sources is it's just remarkable. This isn't some vague spirituality.
Not at all.
It's more like an intellectual and an experiential engineering document. The approach is so systematic, so deeply psychological. It focuses less on external things like deities or rituals and entirely on self-insight.
Self-purification and ultimately self-reliance.
Yes.
Indeed. These teachings, they lay out in almost excruciating detail the anatomy of suffering, how it's built, moment by moment.
And then how to take it apart.
And then they provide the radical, systematic approach to dismantling that entire structure. So we'll be unpacking the precise sequence of how this entire massive suffering originates, and then how the cessation of that whole chain reaction is achieved.
So if you want the clearest possible understanding of the path that's described as the ultimate sanctuary from the yoke,
then let's unpack this.
Okay, let's begin at the end, the final destination.
Yeah.
This practice, it's all aiming for Nibbāna, extinguishment. Now, when people today hear a word like extinguishment, I think it sometimes sounds like annihilation.
Right, like you just cease to exist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the descriptions in the sources, they suggest something profoundly positive and something realized right here in this life.
Yeah.
So how do these ancient texts actually define this supreme state?
They define it, and this is key, strictly in terms of release and experience. Not metaphysics. The core definition is actually quite simple. It's the complete ending of suffering.
Just that.
Just that. But the crucial detail, the operational detail, is how that ending is achieved. And its liberation achieves specifically by not grasping.
Okay, that is such a critical distinction. It implies that suffering is fundamentally, self-inflicted through attachment.
Exactly.
So if you're not holding on to the fire, you can't be burned.
You've got it. And the state that results from this non-grasping is described as the supreme state of sublime peace. The key is realizing that peace isn't just a temporary relief from pain. It's a profound, unshakable serenity that is built into the fabric of reality once that ignorance and attachment are gone.
And the final words of the realized one seem to underscore this idea of a radical self-reliance.
They do. The very last recorded instruction is, conditions fall apart. Persist with diligence. It's like a final command for the individual to take full responsibility for that persistence. It's all on you.
So moving past the technical definition of cessation, the texts also use this incredibly beautiful, evocative language about the experience of freedom. If you achieve this sublime peace, what does that feel like? What are the experiential rewards?
This is where the sources move from dry definition to high poetry. The realized state is described as drinking the nectar of seclusion and the nectar of peace, free of stress, free of evil.
Nectar. I like that.
And even drinking the joyous nectar of Dhamma. I mean, think of that contrast. Most of our lives are spent chasing pleasure in the world, which always comes mixed with anxiety, with dissatisfaction. This is described as a pure, unmixed inner nectar.
And one of the most powerful metaphors they use is describing the realized individual as cooled.
Cooled is perfect. The sources describe the perfected one as cooled and free of attachments, a hero, master the whole world. The worldly life, driven by greed, by hate and delusion, it's often symbolized as a burning fire.
The stress, the anxiety.
The endless craving, right. These are flames. So to be cooled is to have those fires extinguished internally. And the mastery they mention, it isn't external. It's not about ruling nations.
It's internal mastery.
It's the total mastery over one's own internal reactivity and defilements.
And this mastery, it leads to a kind of ontological shift. A change in destiny so profound that the texts say the destiny of these perfected ones is unknown, even to gods, centaurs, and humans. They're just beyond the known cosmic structure.
And that's the perfect transition point. That brings us to the third monumental aspect of the goal, ending the entire cycle of cosmic existence. of rebirth.
Because there's no more fuel for the fire.
Exactly. Since the person is no longer driven by attachment, by grasping, the mechanism for future existence is simply, it's starved of fuel. It just stops.
The ultimate achievement, then, is this definitive declaration of completion. What's the actual language used to declare this final freedom from the cycle?
It's a moment of total comprehension, of finality. The realized individual understands and declares, rebirth is ended, the spiritual journey has been completed, what had to be done has been done, there is nothing further for this place.
Nothing further for this place. That's a powerful phrase. It's like a final objective assessment that the work is completely finished.
It is.
And this liberation, it's total, right? It's not just escaping the suffering of the human realm.
Oh, absolutely. The goal is defined as liberation from the human yoke and, very significantly, the heavenly yoke.
Heavenly yoke, too.
Yes. This indicates that even the most pleasant, most desirable forms of existence, temporary bliss in some heaven, are still considered a form of bondage, a form of a yoke. Total freedom means severing all ties, regardless of how golden the chains might appear.
Okay, so we've established the destination, Nibbāna. This sublime peace achieved through non-grasping, ending the great cycle of suffering. Now that we know where we're going, we need the map. The map that details exactly why we suffer and, more importantly, how we stop.
And this brings us right to the heart of the teaching. The central structural doctrine that was discovered, they say, immediately upon awakening. It's called dependent origination.
Or pakasmupada.
Yes. Think of this as the ultimate root cause analysis for human psychological stress. It provides the mechanism for the entire structure of the Four Noble Truths.
So it's a systemic view of cause and effect. And we're not just talking about moral cause and effect here, like karma. This is psychological, experiential conditioning.
Exactly. Let's look at the forward order first, which describes how suffering arises. The universal law is this. When this exists, this comes to be. Due to the arising of this, this arises. It's a simple formula.
This 12-link chain it's pretty dense, but it's critical. Let's try to walk through the causal links, maybe focusing on the concepts that might feel a bit abstract to us now. It all starts with a lack of insight.
It starts with ignorance, a fundamental misunderstanding of the true nature of reality impermanence, suffering, not self. And this ignorance acts as the necessary requirement for the next link, choices.
Okay, let's pause on that word choices. It sounds simple, but I suspect in the original language it's much broader than just, decide what to have for dinner. What are these choices?
You're absolutely right to pause there. It's not just conscious decision-making. The word is sakkara, and it refers to the entire conditioning stream. The mental formations, the volitional activities, the deep-seated habits and biases that come even before our conscious thought.
So it's like our habitual mental energy.
It's the habitual mental energy that gives momentum to our actions. And these conditioned choices then lead to the arising of consciousness.
And consciousness leads to name and form. This is often the one that feels the most abstract.
It is. Name and form, or namarupa, is really just the technical term for the psychophysical organism. Form, rupa, that's the body, the physical elements.
The hardware.
The hardware, yes. And name, nama, is the mental complex. Feeling, perception, intention, contact, attention, the software. They arise together with consciousness. And once you have the psychophysical organism, it's the necessary requirement for the six sense fields, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind to function.
So the senses arise, and they naturally lead to contact, which is the point where the sense organ meets an object. And contact leads to feeling pleasant, painful, or neutral. So far, this all feels like, just unavoidable human biology. Where does the actual problem start?
The problem starts right here, when feeling conditions craving. This is the absolute hinge point of the whole chain. We experience a pleasant feeling, and immediately, almost without thought, a craving arises to hold on to that feeling or to repeat it.
And if it's a painful feeling?
A craving arises for that pain to cease. Craving is the psychological fuel.
And that fuel just accelerates us toward grasping, making the whole cycle solidify.
Yes. Craving leads to grasping or attachment, which is the act of holding on. Grasping then solidifies the karmic impetus, which leads to continued existence, the energy for future becoming. And that continued existence then guarantees rebirth in the next cycle, which inevitably results in, old age and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress to come to be.
Well, a whole lot.
The whole lot. This entire sequence, powered by ignorance and craving, is how the entire mass of suffering originates.
It's a devastatingly elegant chain. But as you mentioned, the genius of it is that this blueprint also provides the solution. You just reverse the causal flow.
Exactly. The reverse order is the path to extinguishment, and it's governed by the opposite principle. When this doesn't exist, this doesn't come to be. Due to the cessation of this ceases.
So if we can extinguish ignorance at the very root, the entire line of dominoes just falls harmlessly.
It does. When ignorance ceases, choices cease. When choices cease, consciousness ceases, and so on, all the way down the chain. If craving ceases, grasping ceases. If grasping ceases, continued existence ceases. And the final conclusion is the cessation of the entire structure. Old age and death, sorrow, lamentation, all of it. The map for suffering is also the map for freedom.
The core insight, then, the one required to shatter ignorance and break this chain, is understanding impermanence and not self. Basically, seeing that the things we crave and grasp at are, well, they're simply not worth grasping.
These are the foundational insights. The teaching emphasizes that everything we perceive as me or mine, form, feeling, perception, choices, consciousness, those 5 aggregates, they are all impermanent and therefore not self.
They're always changing.
Constantly changing, they are causes of stress, and you can't control them to provide any lasting satisfaction.
And this insight applies not just to our internal psychology, but to the entire observable physical universe, doesn't it?
Yes, the very elements that make up our world, earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness are all declared impermanent. So the whole practice is really predicated on internalizing this truth. When you're dealing with the 6 sense bases, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, the mental check must always be, this is not mine, I am not this is not myself.
That seems so counterintuitive, though. We live our lives based on the assumption of a stable self that experiences all these things.
Yeah.
How do the teachings reconcile this radical idea of not self with the fact that there's clearly an ongoing continuity of experience?
That's where the middle way comes in, and it's crucial for preventing this teaching from becoming just some philosophical speculation. The texts explicitly warn against taking fixed, extreme views about identity.
What are those extremes?
The extremes are, on one hand, eternalism, the view that the soul and the body are the same, or that there's a permanent, unchanging self that persists forever. And on the other hand, annihilationism, the view that everything just ceases upon death and there are no consequences for anything. The teaching avoids both.
Why are they so problematic?
Well, if you firmly believe the body and soul are identical and permanent, you cling to the body. If you believe they are utterly different but still a permanent self, you still solidify a concept of self that obstructs insight. Both extremes just get in the way of living the spiritual life.
So the point isn't to define what the self is, but to see that the things we grasp as the self are impermanent, which breaks the chain of suffering.
Exactly.
And this avoidance of metaphysical extremes, it extends to the great cosmic mysteries too.
It does. The realized one famously refused to engage with a list of undeclared convictions. Questions like, is the cosmos eternal or not? Is it finite or infinite? What's the exact destiny of a realized one after death?
And why the refusal?
It was tactical, not out of ignorance. The sole reason given is that engaging in those debates does not lead to insight, to aversion, to fading away, to cessation, peace, knowledge, awakening, or Nibbāna. The focus has to be exclusively on the practical path that does lead to the complete ending of suffering.
That's a powerful statement of purpose. If it doesn't lead to freedom, it is irrelevant to the path. Okay, so we have the ultimate destination, Nibbāna, and the mechanism of suffering, dependent origination. The next logical step has to be defining the first actions we must take to reverse that chain.
Right. And if dependent origination is the master blueprint, then the physical foundation of the whole structure has to be right conduct. You need stable moral ground to launch into the intensive mental development that comes later. And this is where right view, the very first step of the Noble Eightfold Path, comes in, dictating what is skillful.
So what exactly constitutes unskillful conduct that has to be abandoned? Can you give us the clear list from the source?
Unskillful conduct is divided into 3 doors: bodily, verbal, and mental. Bodily, it's killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. Verbally, it's speech that's false, divisive, harsh, or just nonsensical chatter.
And mentally.
Mentally, the unskillful roots are covetousness, ill will, and crucially, wrong view itself.
And the roots of these actions, these underlying poisons, they're the fuel for the whole fire, right?
Precisely. The texts identify the roots of all unskillful behavior as the 3 poisons: greed, hate, and delusion. If you remove the roots, the plant simply cannot grow. This ethical baseline is so important because it establishes the foundational conditions for future happiness. Principled and moral conduct is the basis for good rebirths, even in heavenly realms.
It sounds like a system of reciprocal relationship then. Ethical action stabilizes your external life, which in turn prepares the mind for the deep internal work. And the full map for that is the Noble Eightfold Path.
The Noble Eightfold Path is the definitive teaching of the Noble Ones. It's a holistic training system. It includes right view and right thought, which is the wisdom part, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. That's the ethical conduct. And finally, right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion, which is the concentration part. It's not just about doing good things. It's about aligning your entire existence toward that one goal of freedom.
This ethical grounding, it leads to what I think is one of the most socially radical takeaways from these sources, the complete redefinition of what a holy person is. In that society, religious authority was all bound up in lineage and caste. The teaching just rejected this entirely.
It was a shockwave, really. In a culture where the Brahmin, the holy person, was defined by birth, the teaching stated that your birth or your profession has absolutely nothing to do with true sanctity. The texts explicitly list those who are not a true Brahmin, despite their societal role. Farmers, professionals, traders, servants, even bandits. It completely democratized spiritual attainment.
So if it's not birth, what defines the true holy person?
Ethical action and internal transformation. Those are the only metrics. The true Brahmin is defined as one who has laid aside violence against creatures firm and frail, and who is not killing or making others kill.
So a deep sense of non-harming.
Deep non-harming. They are quenched among those who have taken up arms, not grasping among those who grasp. And most importantly, they have inwardly discarded greed and hate, along with conceit and contempt. Holiness is purely a measure of character and the cessation of inner defilements.
This foundation is also made accessible for lay followers, right? People with families and jobs. It's not an all-or-nothing system.
Correct. The first irrevocable step onto the path, becoming what's called a stream enterer, is based on mastering just a few core ethical restraints. This means giving up what they call the 5 fears and enmities.
Which are?
Permanently refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and consuming intoxicants. By simply mastering these, you have entered the stream, you're bound for awakening. The texts even provide practical, detailed ethical conduct for domestic life, like a wife being agreeable to her husband, managing wealth, working tirelessly. The path really embraces the whole of life.
It seems like the entire practice, from the ground up, is presented as this very rational process, not a magical one. There's a strong rejection of spiritual shortcuts or any reliance on external power.
That's a critical takeaway. The texts are so clear on this. Spiritual progress does not depend on a wish or a prayer or an invocation. If an ethical person wishes for a good rebirth, that wish succeeds only because their life is already aligned with reality and free from defilement. It succeeds based on rational cause and effect, on practicing well, not on the wish itself.
And conversely, if you rely on the wrong methods,
Yeah.
you are guaranteed to fail. What were the most clearly rejected false paths or dangerous misconceptions found in the sources?
The texts reject 2 main categories of extreme behavior. First, the ascetic extremes, practices involving self-torture, mortification. They're dismissed as just pointless suffering that doesn't lead to insight. There's an example of the dog observance ascetic, who lives and behaves like a dog. The texts say that such practices only lead to rebirth in the company of dogs, or even hell, if you hold the wrong view that this will somehow achieve liberation.
It seems like a very explicit warning against mistaking novelty or, intensity for holiness.
It is. And the second danger is philosophical. You have to reject the harmful misconception that acts declared obstructive like sensual pleasures are somehow not obstructive for you, the performer.
The idea that I can handle it.
Exactly. The temptation to believe I'm spiritual enough to handle this pleasure without attachment. The teaching compares sensual pleasures to a coiled snake, saying they contain inherent suffering and distress regardless of who handles them. And the most dangerous doctrinal pitfall is clinging to the idea that consciousness is some permanent entity that roams and transmigrates. That directly undercuts the not-self teaching and the whole of dependent origination.
Okay, so we've established the ethical groundwork. Our speech and action are purified. Now we use that stability to turn the focus inward, to mental development, which culminates in concentration or samadhi. This is where the mind is actively trained.
And the purpose of concentration isn't just relaxation. It's about forging the mind into a tool that can actually be used for the most difficult task there is, gaining profound insight. Ethical conduct makes the mind calm enough to enter this process of mental immersion, which is described through the 4 stages of absorption, or jhana.
And the goal of this training?
The goal is to make the mind purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable.
Let's walk through the jhanas practically.
Okay.
They represent a clear ascending ladder of concentration. What defines the first rung?
The first absorption is defined by seclusion. You have stepped away from sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities. In this state, the mind is focused. It's experiencing rapture or joy and bliss, which is specifically born of seclusion. Critically, the mind is still actively placing and keeping connected to the object of meditation. It still requires intentional effort to hold the focus.
So it's deep focus, but it's still effortful. What shifts in the second stage?
The effort fades away. In the second absorption, the placing and connecting of the mind are stilled. The focus becomes effortless. This results in a deeper rapture and bliss born purely of immersion, leading to internal clarity and mind at one. The mind is completely unified, like a calm, still pool of water.
And as we move into the third stage, I'm assuming the intensity of that rapture gives way to greater stability.
Precisely. Rapture itself can be a bit agitating. In the third absorption, the rapture fades away completely. The meditator experiences bliss while maintaining this profound equanimity, fully mindful and aware. This is stability with happiness. Practitioners often describe it as the moment the mind achieves true balance.
And the final state, the fourth absorption, that must be the most neutral and powerful state for generating insight.
It is the pinnacle of stability. The fourth absorption involves giving up all feeling of pleasure and pain, achieving a state without them. It's marked by pure, unwavering equanimity and profound, clear mindfulness. This is the state where the mind is truly ready to pierce through ignorance. And it's important to remember the pleasure found in these states is specifically called the pleasure of renunciation and the pleasure of awakening. So it's cultivated, unlike the gross pleasure of the senses, which is to be guarded against.
Moving beyond these very structured states, the practical path involves a continuous, pervasive awareness. This is the role of satipāya mindfulness meditation.
Satipāya is the mechanism for applying insight in daily life. It's a broad, inclusive approach. It encompasses total awareness of the body, feelings, mind states, and mental principles. And it applies to all experiences, even the negative ones, like physical pain, a constricted mind, or the 5 mental hindrances. It is not about escaping reality.
It's about seeing it clearly.
Exactly, seeing it clearly, in the moment.
And the sources insist that this must include the most mundane aspects of existence, transforming daily life into practice.
Oh, absolutely. Situational awareness is key. Acting with awareness when you're going out, coming back, looking around, performing physical actions like bending and extending your limbs, eating, and even being mindful while keeping silent. This constant awareness is what makes the next step, sensory restraint, even possible.
Sensory restraint is so vital that the texts describe it as dressing wounds. If the senses are the gateway to craving, how do you practically restrain them without, shutting them down completely?
The practice isn't about physical blindness or deafness, it's about psychological intervention. When the mendicant sees a sight or hears a sound, they intentionally do not get caught up in the features and details.
So you don't follow the story.
You don't follow the story. You recognize the input without attaching judgment, desire, or aversion to it. This conscious non-engagement prevents unskillful qualities like covetousness or displeasure from overwhelming the mind. The unrestrained sensory faculty is the open wound. Restraint is the protective dressing that prevents psychological infection.
So the practice is training the mind not to chase after the content of experience. But what happens when unskillful thoughts rooted in desire, hate, delusion do inevitably bubble up? The sources provide a really graded, systematic methodology for dealing with them, including some pretty forceful techniques.
Yes, the system for managing defiling thoughts offers several tools. The first line of defense is cognitive replacement. You just focus on a skillful subject instead. If that fails, the second technique is analytical. You examine the drawbacks of the bad thoughts, recognize them as unskillful, blameworthy, and result in suffering. This is about generating a healthy aversion to the defilement itself.
And if analysis and replacement don't work, what's the next stage of escalation?
The third is to aggressively ignore the thoughts. The fourth is to focus on stopping the formation of the thoughts altogether, cutting them off at the pass. And the fifth and most forceful technique is often surprising to modern ears: to use physical exertion. It's described as, with teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, they squeeze, squash, and crush mind with mind.
That specific instruction crushing mind with mind, it sounds antithetical to the goal of peace. It sounds like fighting or grasping at mental stillness. How is that technique not just trading one form of agitation for another?
That's a great question. It's a temporary, targeted application of effort to achieve psychological stability, which is immediately followed by release. The text frames this not as a permanent meditation method, but as a disciplined act of will used to forcibly unify the mind when it's overwhelmed by deeply rooted defilements.
So it's a last resort.
A last resort. And the teaching assures us that when a practitioner succeeds with these methods, the bad thoughts cease and the mind settles, it unifies, and it achieves samadhi. The ultimate goal is that the practitioner becomes a true master of the ways of thought, who can control their internal landscape, having cut off craving and ended suffering. It is force applied not to gain something, but to cease an obstruction.
The path is now complete. We have the stable mind achieved through immersion and discipline. Now we arrive at the moment where insight is generated, the knowledge of the ending of defilements.
This is the culmination of the entire process. When the mind is purified, steady, and imperturbable through samadhi, the realized one extends it toward the knowledge of the ending of defilements. That powerful focus tool is now aimed directly at ignorance itself.
And what specific knowledge arises at that point? Is it a sudden monolithic flash, or is it a more sequential realization?
It is sequential and structural. The knowledge involves truly understanding the Four Noble Truths applied to suffering. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. And crucially, this same pattern of understanding is applied directly to the defilements themselves. Understanding what defilements are, their origin, their cessation, and the path that leads to their cessation.
So it's an absolute cognitive certainty.
Total certainty regarding the mechanism of bondage and the mechanism of release.
And this realization, it requires the full integration of the 7 awakening factors that were being cultivated during all that mental development.
Absolutely. The 7 awakening factors: mindfulness, investigation of principles, energy, rapture, tranquility, immersion, and equanimity are essential. They are developed and cultivated specifically to fulfill knowledge and freedom. And again, the method of cultivation relies specifically on seclusion, on fading away, on cessation. True liberation is achieved by continuously letting go of the conditions that create the feeling of a permanent self.
This ultimate release brings us to the final, profound implication for human action: the ending of karma, or deeds.
Yes, the texts identify a final, transcendent category of deeds. You see, most deeds are either dark, which are unskillful with dark results, or they're bright, skillful with bright results. Both lead to further existence.
Right.
But the deeds of the realized person are neither dark nor bright deeds, with neither dark nor bright results, which lead to the ending of deeds.
That is a total escape from the system. It means the enlightened person's actions no longer generate the momentum that leads to future suffering or rebirth.
Precisely. Their actions are skillful, of course, but they're performed without the root motivations of greed, hate, and delusion. Therefore, they do not create karma in the sense of continued existence. This ultimate path of conduct and realization guarantees the cessation of all sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. The practitioner is utterly released from all internal bonds and is beyond criticism, often described as being praised even by the gods.
And finally, there is this powerful assurance provided for anyone who successfully enters this path, even if they haven't attained Nibbāna yet, the stream enterer. This gives the learner confidence that the effort is worthwhile and, well, guaranteed to succeed.
The stream enterer is the one who has entered the stream of the teaching, bound for ultimate awakening, having permanently quelled those 5 fears and enmities. And the texts provide a stunning piece of hyperbole to illustrate the magnitude of this achievement.
That's the image of the Himalayas, the king of mountains.
It is. Imagine the entire Himalayan mountain range, the largest mountain mass on Earth. Now imagine that mountain being continuously worn away and eroded by wind, rain, and time until only 7 tiny pebbles the size of mustard seeds are left.
Okay.
The suffering that the noble disciple, the stream enterer, has already overcome is vast, like that entire eroded portion of the Himalayas. The suffering that remains, guaranteeing only 7 more rebirths at most, is minuscule, like those 7 mustard seeds.
Wow.
It is an overwhelming assurance of the success that is built into the path itself.
That image truly drives home the scale of the victory achieved. just by taking those first irrevocable steps onto the path. It is the ultimate guarantee of the teaching's efficacy. So let's bring this incredible deep dive to a rapid synthesis for you, the learner. We started with the goal. Nibbāna, defined as sublime peace achieved through non-grasping. The operating principle, the cosmic blueprint, is dependent origination, which shows suffering arises from ignorance and craving.
And the path itself is a rational, systematic training, right? Conduct and ethics, which stabilizes the mind for immersion or jhana and mindfulness.
Which in turn generates the decisive wisdom, the direct insight into impermanence and not self.
The main message drawn from all your sources is really one of profound self-purification and radical self-reliance. Note that the knowledge required for freedom is independent of any external forces. As we saw repeatedly, success in the spiritual life does not depend on prayers or wishes or external intervention, but on leading the spiritual life rationally and diligently practicing the method laid out.
The knowledge of freedom, once it's gained, is described as utterly unshakable. And that leaves us with the provocative thought to close out this deep dive, drawn from the sources themselves. When the realized one achieved his great knowledge, his attendant Mara the Wicked tried everything to disturb him, even attempting to shake the entire vulture's peak.
But the Buddha remained utterly undisturbed.
Exactly.
This internal liberation is presented as the ultimate, unassailable fortress. If freedom is found entirely internally through diligence and knowledge, as the sources proclaim, this raises an important question for your own contemplation. What outside force, human, divine, or even a cosmic villain, can ever truly disturb the mind that is rightly released, the awakened?
That's the fundamental question of internal mastery to mull over long after this deep dive is complete.